Okay, and joining us now is the heretofore anonymous, too young to be Deputy National Security Advisor, Ben Rhodes, who is one of the great champions of democracy and human rights. Ben, I don't know if you want to just go to the podium. People have said, you know, we basically have a Deputy National Security Advisor for the people. Ben has been intimately involved in thinking about how we communicate to people around the world. He's been a true spokesman for human dignity and universal rights, most recently in the Arab Spring, but certainly across Africa, in Burma and beyond. And we're incredibly lucky that he's one of the president's closest advisors and knows the president really better than just about anybody around here. So we're delighted, Ben, for you to close us down after a pretty provocative and, I hope, historic day. Thanks, Ben.
Great. Well, thanks everybody for being here. I was going to open with a lot of really kind words for Samantha until she, decided to take a shot at me, but I'll still do it anyway. What I'll say to you guys is that a lot of you are activists in this space and work to bring attention to these issues every single day. And what you should know that in addition to having a great policymaker here, you very much have an activist in the government in Samantha Power. She is coming after us every single day, every single hour on behalf of the set of issues that I think you care about. And frankly, as someone who first became engaged in a lot of these issues when I read Samantha's first book, I'd say that she is fulfilling exactly the type of policymaker that she called for in that book. And today, I think, is a testament to her work. It's really important for you to be here because, as you know from what you've done, it takes a constituency to force action around issues in a democracy. In a country as big and complicated as the United States, with as many international responsibilities as we have, there are so many things coming into the inbox that it does take citizens bringing issues to their government for attention to force action. And that's what we've seen here in so many instances with the work that you guys have done. And I'll just speak today about some of the personal experiences the president has had with some of these issues to give you a sense as how that reaches him and how it informs his thinking. I appreciated the work that you did, for instance, on the Coney 2012 video because I had to brief the president for a press event he was doing. And it was shortly after that video had run, and I thought that I would make sure he knew about it in case he was asked about it. So I started to say, well, there's this video online, and it's called Coney 2012, and he said, no, I know, Malia showed it to me last night. I went back to the residence, and she said, you know, Dad, what are you doing about this, and showed me the video. So I may not be the youngest Deputy National Security Advisor in the administration. But I mean, again, that shows something about the world that we live in, that people can make a video, put it online, and frankly reach the president in the most personal way. Today you already spoke about a lot of the new tools that we're bringing to bear to prevent atrocities. I won't dwell on them because I think you've done that in these panels, but intelligence assessments that can shape the views and options that come to government, targeted sanctions like what we announced today, from using technology to go after perpetrators of violence to visa bans against people who may want to travel to escape accountability, building capacity within the United States and the UN system and with countries in the region around issues like peacekeeping and pursuing those who have committed crimes against humanity, and of course the Atrocities Prevention Board to make sure that there's someone accountable and responsible in every agency of government that is relevant to this challenge, which cannot be stressed enough because frankly, unless you're institutionalizing change, it doesn't really matter what you do because all of us are only here for a certain period of time. Even if President Obama gets reelected, as we all hope he does, or at least I do, there'll be a new president in 5 years, and we want to make sure that we're building an infrastructure in the government to make sure that we do give meaning to the words never again. But even with all these tools, it often takes a political decision to intervene in a way that can help save lives. And I'll just share with you a few of those instances where I've seen the president do it, because I think it speaks to both his personal commitment, but also the need for people like you to raise awareness around these issues. There are 5 instances that came to my mind as I was getting ready to talk to you today. One was in Kenya in 2008, end of 2007, beginning of 2008, when, in the aftermath of the elections there, there was an extraordinary amount of disturbing rhetoric and some violence. And the president was just hours away from the Iowa caucus, which was going to determine his political future. But he asked us, and I think Sam was part of those discussions, you know, what can I do to help? He obviously is familiar with the tribal conflicts in Kenya, and he taped video messages, radio messages, got his voice into the mix in Kenya to urge calm, and even at that juncture was focused on doing whatever he could to just reach into a very complicated part of the world to deliver a message of restraint and play his small role in what was an international effort to help steer Kenya through that period of violence. Cote d'Ivoire, just to give you an idea of how decisions have to be made quickly that can have long-standing repercussions. I remember we were flying back from Afghanistan. The president had gone to Afghanistan to visit the troops there. And we were on Air Force One, and I got a call from Michelle Gavin, who was then our senior director for Africa. And she said it's imperative that the president call President Gbagbo of Cote d'Ivoire and tell him to step down before he decided to inaugurate himself because he had lost the election there. So I went in to talk to the president on Air Force One. He'd had a long day. It's a 15-hour flight. And just because of those two conversations, he put in a call to President Gbagbo. President Gbagbo didn't take the call. And when somebody doesn't take the call of the President of the United States, you get a pretty good sense that they're going in the wrong direction. So I sat down with the President that night on the plane, and we wrote a message to President Gbagbo, a written message, urging him to step down and making it clear that if he didn't, the United States was going to oppose his staying in power and was going to rally the international community against his effort to stay in power. And then we had a very complicated effort to make sure that that message got delivered to President Gbagbo, or at least somebody near him, in advance of his inauguration from that flight. And we basically ended up emailing a message to our ambassador who could then relay it to the people around Gbagbo. And what that did is it gave us a foothold. It established the illegitimacy of the Gbagbo election, which clearly had not gone as he was claiming it had gone, and it was an opening for the international community. And I think what we have to understand as Americans is that when we move in a direction, oftentimes lots of other people move with us. And so when the president was on the record urging Gbagbo to step down and making clear we were going to put in place travel bans, sanctions, isolation of Cote d'Ivoire, at least the Gbagbo regime, within the UN system, lots of other countries followed on behind us. And then what we were able to do over the course of the next several weeks is build essentially an infrastructure around Gbagbo that isolated him and strengthened the Ouattara, what became the Ouattara government as they sought to take power. And it was a very complicated international environment, but I often think back to the fact that it was that one decision made by the president on board Air Force One in the middle of the night to place that call and to write that message, that if we hadn't done that, if he had decided to go to sleep, I don't know how that situation might have gone. The United States might not have gotten on the record. And frankly, something that wasn't a front burner issue in our country could have had a negative consequence for millions of people in that part of Africa. Sudan, Samantha will remember we had a meeting in the summer of 2010 to discuss the preparations for the referendum. And they were, to put it generously, not proceeding well. There was not the infrastructure in place to hold an election. There was not the international support necessary to pressure the Sudanese government to allow the referendum to go forward. And the president was very frustrated with what he heard. And he basically told us to rip up the playbook and come up with a new one. And what that led to was a meeting at the UN General Assembly, at which the president chaired a meeting to rally support for the referendum. It led to a lot of diplomacy, not just with our traditional allies, but with the Chinese and others, to apply pressure on the Sudanese to allow the referendum to go forward. The deployment of significant resources to support the South Sudanese as they move towards an election. And ultimately, South Sudan was able to exercise self-determination. Again, there are tremendous challenges and problems that still exist in Sudan and South Sudan. But again, I think without a high-level push from the United States government, from the President of the United States, it's very unlikely to see that we could have had an independent South Sudan today, and the conflict could be significantly worse. Libya, similarly, we were in a number of discussions with the President in the days leading up to what became the UN Security Council resolution. We had a meeting on a Tuesday, I remember, which was just 3 days before that UN Security Council resolution. And the President was presented with an option of supporting a no-fly zone in Libya right after he had heard that a no-fly zone wouldn't do anything to stop the killing in Libya because Gaddafi's forces were advancing on the ground and were preparing to massacre potentially tens of thousands of people in Benghazi. And the President ended the meeting there, told us to go back and come up with some better options to bring to him if we were really serious about taking action to prevent this atrocity. And that's what happened in the course of the next several hours, and we had another meeting at which the President decided that we were going to not only do a no-fly zone, but support all necessary measures through the United Nations system to protect civilians within Libya. And within 48 hours of that decision by the President, we had a UN Security Council resolution. And within 72 hours, we had essentially stopped the advance of Gaddafi's forces on that city. Again, a political decision made by the President of the United States that has extraordinary impact on the lives of people half a world away. And each of these instances, I think, reinforces the fact that for all the tools that we can bring to bear, for all of the information that we can make sure exists within the U.S. government, if you don't have political will, you can't accomplish nearly as much as you would like to, and thousands of people could die as a result. Obviously, the LRA, which you've all spoken about too, is an instance where I think the President took an interest in this in the Senate, in large part because of the very effective advocacy that many NGOs and others had done to bring this to the fore. And that familiarity carried on into the presidency and ultimately led to him signing the legislation, but also deploying advisors to the region to help end the threat from the LRA and bring Joseph Kony to justice. So again, I think what each of these point to is situations that, frankly, would not have reached the President's inbox through normal channels. The President is dealing with the economy, he's dealing with Afghanistan, he's dealing with issues in the Middle East, he's dealing with China. He's got a very full plate. And it takes both the personal interest of the person sitting in the Oval Office together with a concerted effort by his own government and citizens like yourselves to bring these issues to the forefront so that he can be in a position to make the types of decisions that he's made. I working with the President for 5 years, and I may be young, but I've aged a lot in those 5 years. There's a picture of me in my office at the beginning of my time with the President, and I look, well, it's me and Dennis McDonough, who's another Deputy National Security Advisor. His hair is brown. I have hair. So a lot's changed in those 5 years. But the reason I believe so much in this President is I know he has a belief in the dignity of every life, and he believes that with America's power in the world comes a great moral responsibility. That's what he said to us in many of these instances that I've identified, which is that the United States is different from other countries. We're different from China. We're different from Russia. We're different from other countries that don't care about what happens within the borders of places that are half a world away. I believe that the President believes that because of his understanding of America's role in the world, also from his personal experience, growing up in Indonesia, a country that when he lived there had just recently suffered through a very significant round of mass killings and atrocities that were very nearby when the President was a child. From having family, of course, that fought in World War II and saw the horrors of the Holocaust, and family in Kenya today, who, of course, have had to face the prospect of potential violence as a result of tribal conflicts. So I think he has both the personal experience and an understanding of what the United States can do in the world. But he also has a familiarity with you and your activism. As somebody who comes out of a tradition of citizens mobilizing behind a cause, who built a campaign based on that concept of citizens mobilizing around a cause. Now, we also know and have to acknowledge that the United States does not have infinite power, and we cannot save every life around the world. Even as we sit here today with an independent South Sudan, we obviously have far too much suffering that is still going on in that part of the world, and which is why we need to redouble our efforts on days like today to do everything that we can to stop the violence there. And of course in Syria, where we've tried to do everything that we can and use every tool that we can and develop every tool that we can to work on multiple tracks of both pressuring the government there, supporting the opposition there. But I think what we have established is a status quo where the United States is going to deploy its power and deploy the tools that we have to bear to save every life that we can in those situations where we can make a difference. And I think we've built a record of doing that while also trying to build the basis of having tools to do that going forward. And again, I think that even with the many difficult challenges that we face around the world, what we're doing is we're strengthening the norms that exist in the world behind saving civilians, behind protecting civilians, and behind holding accountable those leaders who act against the human rights of their own people. So I think what comes together today and why days like today matter is the tools that we need and the political will that we need. You need both, and that's where you play such a fundamental role, because you build awareness that wouldn't otherwise exist in this country around these issues. If there were not people like you, it's safe to say that a lot of the issues that were discussed in these panels would not be getting attention in Washington, because there are other things that can get attention here in Washington. And so you need to raise your voices, and you need to make sure that your government is being responsive to the imperative around never again and around the support for human dignity. You build support for action through your efforts with Congress, through your efforts with within your communities, and you demand more of your government. You'll criticize us when necessary, and we welcome that criticism. I'd ask that you also say good things when we do the right things, and that's actually important because when we make an announcement around deploying advisors to go after the LRA, not everybody understands exactly why there are U.S. service members who are now serving in this part of the world. And we can communicate the reasons behind our policies, but it's very important that our communication is amplified by those who've lobbied on behalf of those issues and who've advocated on behalf of action. And so those are the times when we need you to make sure we can sustain public support for very challenging efforts around the world. That, I think, is, in sum, what we need to take away from today. How can government draw on the advocacy of people like you? How can we also learn from you? In many instances, if you go out and you do the work and you're out in these places, you may have ideas that can be brought to bear and that can help inform the decisions that your government is making. So I think that we should see this as an important step forward today in the work that citizens have been doing and the work that government has been doing to make sure that we are setting up the infrastructure necessary to prevent atrocities and to have a government that reflects the values of our people and that cares about what's happening in what could be forgotten places around the world. Because, again, if America is not serving as a voice for people in Africa, for people in Burma, for people who are subject to human trafficking, they often don't have a voice. They're not going to find a voice from the Chinese government, for example. They're not necessarily even going to find a voice through some of the international institutions that are set up unless the United States is bringing these issues to the forefront. So if we fail to fulfill that responsibility, tragically, as we've learned in our history, it goes unfulfilled. And I think, the President spoke about this most eloquently in his Nobel address when he acknowledged that it's just the nature of human beings to at times do violence upon one another. But even as that is the case, there's also a goodness and a common humanity that brings us together that can be bigger than the things that drive us apart. And that what has to empower us every day and motivate us every day is the knowledge that even as we're here in Washington, working within the relative comfort of our surroundings. We know that there are ordinary people out there around the world who are doing extraordinary things under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And because of America's interest in being a world leader that empowers positive norms, and because of our common humanity and interest in human dignity, we have a responsibility to keep those people on our minds as we're making policy, and as we're making decisions, and as we're living our own lives. So for that reason, I thank you for all that you've done. Congratulate Samantha and her team for the rollout today. We look forward very much to continuing to have a dialogue with you guys going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben. Let's give another round of applause for Ben, please. Thank you. Okay, well, that concludes the event this afternoon. Again, thank you to everybody who's watching online. Thanks to all of you for joining. I know you guys came from around the country to be here, so thank you.